Greetings and shalom. So today this video is going to be about the so-called black people have culture, or more specifically, black culture is the problem in the so-called black community. Because like I've stated in many of my older videos, so-called black is not a race, okay? It's a misnomer. It's a corporate color destination. And when you really think about so-called black culture, or what they call hip-hop culture as well, what has it produced? Has it produced any educational or economics or resources to benefit the so-called black community? It has not. The only thing so-called black culture, or AKA hip-hop, has done is fill the prisons and kill the youth, until so-called black people realize that they have been played and suckered into believing that black is a culture. That's the issue. The real solution to this is to go back to the laws, statutes, and commandments, not religion. Religion is a hell of a drug, but laws, statutes, and commandments, okay, these are divine laws, okay? This is where we can solve our issues and our problems, but it starts at home, and it starts with embracing family, father, mother. So-called black man, protect your seed. So-called black woman, stop spreading your legs. We are also going to look up the etymology of the word culture, because a lot of our people do not understand what real culture is. We think hip-hop, we think a crayon is a culture, but it doesn't transcend time, okay? Real culture is knowing your language, your custom, your identity, the deity that you serve, and so forth, okay? That is real culture. So now we're at the etymology of the word culture. Noun, mid-15th century, the tilling of the land, the act of preparing earth for crops, from Latin, cultura, a cultivating agriculture, figuratively care, culture, a honoring. Now, when you sit here and you look at the last 50 years, or the inception of quote unquote black culture or hip hop culture, what has it produced? Has it produced healthy crops, or has it produced bad crops? Okay. Look at the music, the low vibration, and the satanic or demonic influence it has on the youth. All with the gangster rap, NWA. It was nothing but a bunch of warlocks or witches, but more specifically warlocks, okay? They were all black. That's why they made the movie CB4, because these were not real gangsters or street dudes, besides Eazy-E.
Fuck a plan B, them little shits don't even work. Let them nut all in my guts, and then I go and pop my perk. Let them nut all in my mouth, I think I got some on my shirt. Kept my $50, and I went and blew it on some yurt. Yeah, fuck a plan B, them little shits don't even work. Let them nut all in my...
Debauchery, the more specific meaning seduce from virtue or morality, as we just seen. Corrupt the morals or principles of is from the 16th century, especially to corrupt the lewdness, seduce sexually, usually in reference to women. A lot of these so-called black women or rappers now are nothing but pawns on the chessboard, okay? That's just facts. Entrance of sense, indulge in excess and sensual enjoyment is from 1640s. About of excessive sensual pleasure is from the 16th century. Reading on from past participle stem or collier to tend, guard, to till, cultivate, meaning the cultivation or rearing of a crop, act of promoting growth in plants. I think studies have shown if you play classical orchestra music, plants will thrive or, have a better healthy life. But when you play bad or low vibrations, depending on the frequencies, the plant dies. It's the same thing with us humans, okay? That positive energy or reinforcement is needed. We don't see this in the music.
They've discovered the chirping sound that birds make at 4 in the morning opens the stomata. You ever wonder, why are the birds out there chirping at 4 in the morning? Go to bed. Oh no, they're doing their job. They open up the stomata under the leaf. One guy got curious about this, so he found out that the chirping of the birds can be mimicked with classical music. This guy in Iowa started playing classical music to his cornfield. His neighbors thought, half a bubble off a plum, maybe, till his corn grew 15 feet tall. They said, what channel was that you're listening to? I think the pre-flood world had greater air pressure, increased CO2, filtered sunlight, the music of...
Now we're in the book of Galatians chapter 5, verse 19. Now the works of the flesh are manifest, and which are these: adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such like, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in time past, that they that do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of God or the Most High. So when you watch Netflix, or more specifically Tubi, there's a black cinema or black section, which is a joke. But when it comes to Hollywood and movie portrayals of historical pictures and depictions of characters, our people will never rise to that level, especially in Hollywood, okay? Our people are given C, D, and F, or F-based type movies, which are low caliber at times. I mean, it's sad when our people have to glorify a Wakanda Forever, which was created by Stan Lee, a so-called white man, along with the miseducation, especially in the school system or public school system. This is why our people fail to realize that we were in different societies throughout the medieval Americas, Europe, and so forth, the Dark Ages, as knights, squares, dukes, etc. We don't picture ourselves because they always want to drill in us the slave narrative.
Kai's not sitting here saying that black Americans not having culture. And listen, this...
And he's correct by stating black is not a culture. There's no heritage, there's no language, there's no land mass, there's no language that's black, quote unquote. And what is the deity that's associated with being blackness? Unless you're a polytheistic and believe in many gods, which a lot of our people do.
This is coming from a Haitian American man, right? I am a Haitian American man. I think Kai Cenat is half Haitian. I'm not sure. But I'm a Haitian American man, right? And I can't tell you how much I benefit from black American culture. So you would never see me come off the side of my mouth sitting here saying that black Americans ain't really black or ain't really African or whatever the heck he was talking about.
And this is one of the many issues when coming to realization that when people actually say these sentiments or statements that black isn't a culture or black isn't a race, it makes you think. I mean, what were our people called before the inception of America? They definitely were not called African Americans or black. But in times past, we had ancient names and languages and different dialects that we spoke. But now our people are only conditioned to speak English and think that we've only come from slave ships from the west parts of Africa.
I don't know if Kai Cenat's fans are going to see this, but your boy literally wouldn't have the platform he has now if it wasn't for black American culture.
I mean, when you look at the Tubi platform or MTV or VH1, like Love and Hip Hop, all these shows are based in debauchery or whatnot. It's based in low-level trash or drama. Someone pulling off wigs, tattoos, pants hanging off their ass, and so forth. This is what's glorified in the so-called black community. I'm not going to generalize and say all that, but, one of the many curses of trying to uplift and live your own life is you're going to be labeled so-called white because you're acting morally and morally sound, versus your counterparts who want to criticize you and say that you're acting white because you want a better life or education for yourself. Crab in a barrel or bucket mentality.
From the use of AAVE to the locks, to the two-strand lock twist style, to everything, down to a T, wouldn't be without black American culture. Some of these streamers, man, I feel like they got to be a requirement to be a celebrity. You got...
Funny you should say that. There is a requirement for fame. They tell you in their shows and movies and podcasts, them always worshiping the GOAT, Samael, okay, the greatest of all time, Uncle Sam. All these rituals they have to do, and you have to spread them cheeks.
You got to do some basic entry-level You know what I'm saying? Like social classes or something. Because brother, that was one of the dumbest takes I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, the circumstances are. So someone once criticized the mental tests on grounds that the tests were unfair. And I think it was David Reisman who said the tests are not unfair. Life is unfair, and the tests are measuring the results.
Life is unfair and there's no such thing as equality. There's always a head and a tail of society. It's based in competition. But our people are taught that we have to be equal with our quote unquote oppressors.
But who has control of life? Who has control of the past? Who has control of the culture that people have in the present, which they've inherited from the past?
So Lyndon Johnson, he's in fact, although good liberal that he was, at least in regard, Lyndon Johnson had a complicated career and changed positions on issues many times. But good liberal though he was at that moment, he was in fact engaging in a breathtaking arrogance.
Yes.
On two counts. One, that white people were the ones who were responsible for where black people stood in the race.
And our people are indoctrinated with the victimization that's taught in the Eurocentric or his version of history. Okay. And then, like Malcolm X said, the liberal, okay, he's a fox. He smiles at you and whatnot. Okay, he's deceptive. But the thing is, their people have been taught their own lies as well, believing that we're victims of slavery and many other atrocities, which, you know, the history shows that we are in a sense, but not to a whole totality at all.
That it was up to whites entirely. That blacks, as he described, I'm putting this
devastating.
black people are passive; they're acted upon.
That's right. That's right.
And then the second act of arrogance is the supposition that somehow the federal government could fix it.
The federal government is not going to solve so-called black people's issue, okay, or in the so-called black community. The only person that's going to solve the so-called black man's issue is himself, starting with him, starting with who he procreates with, who he chooses to have a life with. Your seed is one of the most valuable treasures on this planet, so use it wisely, or you'll be in the court system playing games.
Yes. It is staggering. But if you wanted to be charitable, you could say, well, he said this in 1965. But if you say, all right, why are people now repeating it in 2013 when we've had nearly half a century of experience to the contrary? And if you look within the black community, those blacks who had escaped what I call the black redneck culture, they've moved on. But it's the culture the different parts of the black community had. They were different.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, in his famous 1965 report entitled "The Negro Family: The Case for National Action," close quote. Longish quotation, but it gets to something, I believe. Moynihan, the fundamental problem is that of family structure.
And I do believe that is one of the major issues in the so-called black community is the family structure. The man is supposed to be the head. Now, I do believe the crack epidemic era during the late 70s and 80s was a very detrimental phase in the so-called black or Negro family structure because the men were put in the prison industrial system. Crack is a hell of a drug, right? And we see the implications and the generations it scarred through that time period. But, you know, this was all strategized. And this was called the war on drugs. But all hip hop stems from is the crack epidemic era. It also reads, the Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling, which it still is to this very day. A middle class group has managed to save itself, but for the vast numbers of the unskilled and poorly educated. This is why our people want to only be rappers and entertainers. Okay? Where are the other skill sets that are, you know, to thrive or, you know, create our own? Because at the end of the day, it's about rulership, entrepreneurship, and starting your own or building an infrastructure within your own community or your own people instead of begging for other people to help. It is not their responsibility to help us. They're their oppressors, right? So why would they help us? We have to ask those type of questions. If someone's your enemy, why are they going to help you financially and spiritually? It doesn't make sense. And oftentimes on TikTok and social media, I see the degradation of people's sentiments and statements of someone's job or career. You need plumbers, you need construction workers, you need truck drivers, you need all the essentials to maintain a civilization or a society. At the end of the day, a lot of our people will not make over $500,000 or six figures. Okay, there's a certain percentage that do make that, but doesn't mean they're beneath you. The disassociation with logic and some of the comments or statements that some of these women make, depending on how much money you make, is worth your value and whatnot.
The Negro family in the urban ghettos is crumbling. A middle class has managed to save itself, but for vast numbers of the unskilled and poorly educated, the fabric of conventional social relationships has all but disintegrated. So long as this situation persists, the cycle of poverty and disadvantage will continue to repeat itself. Close.
Also, to make a point, we have to be careful who we inseminate or who we impregnate. We have to be careful who we procreate with, okay? At the end of the day, you can either bring a child into heaven or you can bring them into hell. It's a state of mind. If you're in the quote unquote ghettos or can't even afford a meal, why would you want to bring a child into your hell that you can't even survive or maintain a sustainable life? To me, I just never understood the concept of, if I'm struggling, why would I want to bring my son or daughter into this world or earth to struggle and go through my pain and then pass that down from generation to generation, like in Section 8 housing and projects and so forth. Somewhere down the line, it has to stop.
Quote, when Moynihan wrote those words, the illegitimacy rate among African Americans was 25%. Today, the illegitimacy rate among white Americans is 36%. Among Hispanics, more than 50%. And among African Americans, more than 70%.
Yes.
Aside from throwing up your hands in despair, what is to be done?
The first thing to be done is to understand that this was a result of policies begun in the 1960s. This is not a legacy of what happened 100 years before the 1960s.
The breakdown of the black family is not a legacy of slavery.
No. If you, the classic study of this goes all the way back to the era of slavery, and they find that most black kids, even under slavery, had lived with two parents.
Now we're going to look at the book, Developing Positive Self-Images and Discipline in Black Children. Because in this modern society, the glorification or the mother goddess archetype as mother child is glorified in this society, believe it or not. When you look around social media or the news, males are considered sperm donors.
If you have disrespectful and unruly children, there are benefits. I promise you, single moms, there are benefits in raising your children alone. You have no one to interfere with your parenting. No.
Now we're on page 78, single parenting. An issue affecting many families is single parenting. This parental state has reached epidemic proportion. The problem is a national problem with 67 million people single. 40% of all families are headed by a woman. We know in the scriptures, the man is supposed to be the head. Okay, the man has to discover, or the so-called black man has to discover who his power is, which is the Most High. And only 13% of all families fitting the traditional mode of two parents with the mother at home. For the black community, it translates into 62% of all its children living in a single-run household. Of course, the problem is not single parenting, because it takes two to make a baby. 1 + 1 = 2. The concern is what happened to the man, ? The definition of manhood adhered to by most people is being the breadwinner An effective strategy to destroy the so-called black man is to deny them the opportunity to work and to create welfare legislation that encourages and mandates their removal from the household. Black women are left with two options: either ignore the impact that institutional racism and white male supremacy has on her man with no compassion, or provide understanding, encouragement, and supplemental income. The first option further annihilates the black family, and the second, while preferred, is not totally acceptable to black men who continue to look to white society for approval rather than their family. It takes a secure, well-informed man and woman to cope with male unemployment and remain harmonious. The book Countering the Conspiracy to Destroy Black Boys is an attempt to develop this sensitive awareness and to intervene before the problem is manifested. This part of the book will attempt to understand the issue of single parents. Now right here I've highlighted the family structure has changed with the economy, and definitely has. I think we all can agree to that. And it reads, when the economy was agriculturally based and employment was higher, the family structure was based on the extended family concept. This economy encouraged large numbers of children and relatives. The economy that followed was based on factory production. This system was geared towards urbanization and required less labor, and the family structure responded with the nuclear family. Children were less desired in this economy, creating the need for mass public education and primary grades through to high school. The present economy of computerization encourages greater mobility than previous economies, which were tied to land and factory. But the new economy based on information encourages movement of people as quickly as you can move information. This economy has even less need for children and workers. Marriages have historically provided economic security to women, but this new economy where women work just as much, if not more than men, makes each part economically independent. Also, is a promotion of certain groups like Destiny's Child. I do believe the song in 2000, Independent Woman, okay? And we see this even in today's society where money is a measuring stick of one's manhood or no manhood, especially if your counterpart makes more than you. But the, incentive is that the so-called black man is no longer needed. So why does the so-called black man need to protect his own when he's no longer counted for? Or what is his role in this society when he is replaced by the government or the so-called white man? Okay, what role do you have in your life? What is your purpose? Most people don't even know what their purpose here on life is. This contributes to the large incidence of divorce in our society. And statistics show that women initiate more divorces than men, okay? And compounded in the so-called black community because of high male unemployment. Now right here I highlighted the 5 major problems of single parenting are the lack of time, the lack of money, loneliness, children's acceptance of the situation, and missing role model, which 90% of the time will be male. Simple mathematics illustrate that with 1 parent versus 2, there will be less time given to the children.
And that was true all the way up until the 1960s. And so if you really want to find out what's changed, it has changed since the 1960s. And the fact that whites now have a higher rate of illegitimacy than blacks had when Moynihan wrote suggests that this is something that spreads out. But if you look at something else, if you look at those blacks, and look at black husband-wife families, the poverty rate among such families has been in single digits every year since 1994. And so if you look at the external causes, why the husband and wife families and the welfare single mom families all are facing the same society and objective things, but the results are radically different because the cultures and values are different.
So you would roll back welfare. I guess that's the principal policy. So what would Tom Sowell do? 1, you'd eliminate welfare, you'd reform welfare. What would you do?
Roll it back.
All right. And what about affirmative action?
Eliminate it.
Just gone.
Yeah.
Colorblind policy completely. All right. What prospect for that do you see?
None.
No
At
black,
present.
no black leader of any standing. I'm talking about a political leader as opposed to an intellectual such
Right.
as yourself. You've got, well, there's you, there's Walter Williams. Do you get the sense that there's a growing generation, a rising generation of African-American intellectuals who say, enough of this, I'm with Tom Sowell?
Well, I don't know if they'll go that far. There's no point.
That would be asking a lot.
There's no point being reckless. But I think there are people like Shelby Steele and many others, Larry Elder. You can run through a long list, and there are more such people now than there were, say, in the 1970s. But in terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for black leaders to blame all problems in the black community on the larger society. And that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group. That there's no point. I mean, why would you, if you believe what they say, why would you want to knock yourself out in school knowing that the man is not going to let you get anywhere? One of the most pathetic things I heard in recent years was a young black man saying that, at one point he thought he would join the Air Force and become a pilot. And then he says he realized that the white man is not going to let a black man become a pilot. And he was saying this decades after the Tennessee Airmen had established their reputation in combat in Europe. But the hopelessness is one of the big products of the race industry. That you have no chance. I remember giving a talk at Marquette, and at the end of the talk, among the questions that was asked, a young black man got up and he said, "Even though I am graduating from Marquette University, what hope is there for me?" And having gone through college when I was in the 50s, I don't remember any blacks saying that in the 1950s, when there was a lot more obstacles to overcome than there were when this guy is graduating from Marquette. But you have to produce that kind of feeling in order to serve the interests of those in the race industry.
Final question then. Maybe we can think in terms of that young man at Marquette. Or let's put it this way. Somewhere watching this interview, there's a young Thomas Sowell. There's an African American who's smart and wants to do something with his life. It seems to me we've already got one piece of advice you'd offer to him is stay away from the racist industry. Stay away from the race hustlers. What advice would you give